I'm live. I'm live? I'm live. I think I'm live. Hey there. How's it going to the one or two people who are here? I hope it's only a few people here because this is our first airing of Jimalytics Live, intentionally scheduled on a Friday afternoon. So we minimize the amount of people to watch this train wreck. And I can't guarantee that it's going to be super entertaining. I can't guarantee that there are going to be a lot of quiet pauses because it's my first one. So what exactly are you watching here? You're watching a live interactive type of format. This isn't a podcast. I don't know how to do podcasts because I don't listen to them, and a lot of them are so high production value. I can't copy that. I think Digital Analytics Power Hour and 33 Tangents pretty well have that covered. Analytics Neat. This also isn't a guide or a series. Matteo, Zambone, Simo, Julius from Analytics Mania, they do a lot of really, really great content out there. So trying something new. We're going to go through some blog posts, talk about analytics stuff. I don't know how long this is going to last. If there's participation, it might last longer. If there's no participation, then who knows? It might only last 10 to 15 minutes. The gist of it is I want to talk through blog posts. I want to talk through stuff that I've written about, stuff that I care about. The intent right now isn't to really have guests. I don't know how to effectively use YouTube Live, and I was hoping I could share my screen instead of having you look at my beautiful forehead and face. But like I said, version 1 of this. So welcome for those of you who are here. Happy Friday, and I'm sorry you have to spend your Friday afternoon with me instead of doing something a little bit more interesting, but we're all living in COVID times, so I guess this is the new normal. Feel free to use the chat off to the right, or I don't know if you can mirror it and move it around or whatever. I do see the chat, and I will respond to you if you talk on it. And today, what I wanted to go through was the Analytics Appeal article that I wrote over a year ago. So since it's been over a year, I wanted to talk about what's changed since that was written. So if you haven't seen it, the link's in the description. It's the Adobe launched data layer : unappeal. Not unappeal, like unappealing, but unappeal. For those of you who don't like reading, this might be an easier format because we're going to go through it. We're going to go through some nuance. I prefer to read blogs and articles and stuff like that as opposed to watching videos, but sometimes I like to just sit there and watch stuff. What was I talking about over a year ago? Well, Adobe was launched. That name kind of still eats away at me a little bit, having to use launch 3 times in a sentence, over a year ago. And it's a fantastic tag management system. I mean, both Google and Adobe have really great tag management solutions. Telium too. I think that's about where the list ends. And Google has its own data layer, which is the Google Tag Manager event-driven data layer. You might be used to it from seeing datalayer.push. Adobe Launch, though, was built to be open-ended, which is really cool. So like if you're an open source junkie kind of person and you really love coding your own stuff and having an infinite amount of control over everything, then I mean, Telium and Launch, that's your game. GTM is more walled in, and they also include their own type of data layer. Now, the Adobe Launch Appeal, the purpose of that was to drive towards some standardization. I think the intent to be open source was it was like a worthy cause and to make it a totally open platform. But in consulting, we work with a lot of folks who are like, well, we want something that's official from Adobe. And where do they go first? They look at Google. And the first results that pop up often are Adobe's documentation. Now, I know someone from Adobe's probably on this or maybe watching this, ready to heckle. Adobe's documentation traditionally hasn't been the most consistent. It's thorough. Well, some of it's thorough. When you can find something that isn't a 404, it's thorough. But their recommendations for a data layer are kind of all over the place. I mean, you could use a direct call rule. You should use W3C, insert whatever other methodology. I looked up some articles on Observe Point. Google it right now. For those of you who are watching, Google Adobe Launch Data Layer. I'm going to do that with you, actually, because it's been a year, and I talked about what it looked like, and I wish I could share my screen. Like I said, this is the first time I selected the webcam option, and I don't think there's an option to share my screen here. Which, by the way, tell me if you can't hear me. I haven't gotten anyone on chat. Can you all hear me? Sound coming in okay? Boom. There we go. Now I know who's on. What's up, Phil and Chen? Hey, and Jam Jam. All right. So let's Google. Let's Google Adobe Launch data layer right now. Adobe Launch data layer. Okay, using a data layer to set up page name. The first thing I get, I'm using incognito. The third link actually is the to my blog post, but I'm gonna look at create a data layer, and it looks like this was updated August 6, 2020. Oh no. Well, they're still recommending the W3C format. Why do I give a shit? Why do I care that they recommend the W3C format? Like, why would anyone care? And post in chat if you think I shouldn't care. If you think no one should care, who cares what data layer you put up? The reason it's a big deal is because the W3C hasn't been updated in a decade. It was created a decade ago. It was great for what it was. I mean, because it like brought it to the mainstream, you know? Like NWA brought like aggressive rap to the mainstream. W3C, which I'm not saying W3C is in any way comparable to NWA, but the W3C brought data layers into the mainstream. Where it went wrong, in my opinion, if you can say it went wrong, I think it did a lot that was right. But I think a lot of what wasn't that great about it was that it focused on the schema instead of the vehicle, you know? And that's important because the folks who are doing the exact same thing that I do, that I just did, which was Google Adobe Launch Data Layer, are going to see those two links from Adobe's documentation as the first results. And what do? They say, okay, well, I guess W3C is the standard. Well, that's fine. It's on the W3C website, but it doesn't support single-page apps. Now, that's really frustrating for consultants, and it's really frustrating for practitioners who are client-side, because if you do anything beyond traditional page loads, it breaks. You can't use it. You have to build your own engine, or you have to use history change. That's a pain in the ass, you know? It's obnoxious. Because now we're kind of playing, we're having to go back to them, or we're having to fix this recommendation that came straight from Adobe. So the appeal, the basis of the appeal was for Adobe to settle on a single sustainable data layer. And really what this is turning into is settle on the event-driven data layer. Not settle on the W3C, not settle on just using direct call rules, which, by the way, Telium is kind of in the same boat. I mean, they use an equivalent to direct call rules, UTAG view and UTAG event, I think. That's kind of the same thing as a direct call rule, and I think they should get on the same data layer boat. They have other data layer things like flattening the object that I think are way out of whack that they need to address, but I guess they don't have to. But so where are we at right now with launch? So it's been a year since that was written. I got on board with Data Layer Manager. I think that's the best event-driven data layer manager out there right now. It's a lot easier to use than any other data layer extension. There's also the Adobe Client data layer. And this is, I think, like indirect response to the appeal. And why were these things created? Obviously, we wanted to work with a single page app. We want it to be we want to have some kind of standard. We want it to be something that's modern. Another thing to note with the W3C is that it's so old that I think, what was it, 60%, 64% of the authors work somewhere else. And this is a year ago. 25 of the represented companies no longer exist, and 2 of those companies built their own data layer. And we're still somehow recommending this to people. I get that JSON objects are easy. Event-driven data layers are a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're a little bit more abstract. And now I'm chiming into Jen's calling out her control freakness. I mean, you have the same amount of control. Now the upshot is, obviously, with launch, you can't, if you're a consultant, what do you have to do? You have to recommend the Search Discovery branded data layer manager extension, which is difficult for some companies to do. Especially with the Adobe Client data layer, there's nothing that's public yet. They have the private extension that's available for Adobe Launch. They don't yet have anything that's public, so you have to upload it on your local environment. The issue is, without anything that's officially supported by Adobe, and Adobe Client data layer technically is supported by a data layer, but it's more of like technically is supported by Adobe, but it's by the consulting group, and some people draw lines between the consulting group and the product group, and there is a difference. But I really think Adobe should still get behind a data layer vehicle. When I say data layer vehicle, what I mean is a methodology to send data from your website to your tag management system, which is either Adobe Launch or something like Telium, or Incitant if you're Delta. So ultimately, when we talk with clients and we're trying to speak the same language, and we're talking internally, we have a clear direction, right? And that's a big deal, especially with XDM and stuff like that that's coming down the pipe. I mean, I think it's only become more important for Adobe to either officially sponsor or create their own data layer, because we're now moving to, instead of thinking about variable and value, prop and a value, EVAR and a value, event, sometimes a value, we're thinking of key value, which is why, and that's kind of like, to get people to think with those patterns, I think it's important to adopt, to officially sponsor or adopt a data layer, create your own or something like that. Otherwise, you're going to have a million different methodologies, and most of which might not be effective at sending data to Adobe servers. What do you guys think? There's 7 people on watching right now. I know someone's got an opinion. Jen's all for key value pairs. That's fantastic. Yeah, me too. And on top of that, if you haven't been to Memphis, Swanky's, fantastic, like half-liter cups. Highly recommend going and getting some of their tacos. If you're ever in Memphis, or if you're ever outside. There's not many of us are right now. I'm stuck here in my basement for the rest of my life. So I think the gist of it is where have we come in the last 10 years the last 1 year since the appeal, and how have we matured in the last 10 years? Since the appeal, I think there's been some movement, but without sponsorship from Adobe, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of movement. And I know there's support from Adobe to push in that direction, but to be honest, there's not much money in building your own data layer, and I don't know if there's enough. Let's see here. So Jen also said just that an EDDO must be managed by something. Can make things a harder sell. I have no problem recommending tools from competitor agencies to it all. Well, and it's not specifically about you. I know a lot of folks do have issues with recommending tools from competitors, and I think also as a consulting firm, it's challenging for me to recommend tools that good friends of mine have even built, because it's like you don't know how much is being managed, and you don't know how much is being maintained. And something that's as important as a data layer, something that's important as a data layer, I don't know how comfortable I am, kind of putting it in somebody else's hands. That's what's tricky. And I'm not downplaying. I mean, data layer manager is I can tell you that it's fully maintained. I can tell you that we have an entire team. By we, I mean I work for Search Discovery, and we do have an entire team that maintains it and keeps it running. But as a client and as a practitioner, I don't know that. I don't know that. And then there's a ... But having that tool, data layer manager, be something that is 100% critical to the whole solution, it requires a lot of, it does require a lot of vetting. It requires a whole lot of trust. And that's why, especially I think it's important for Adobe to adopt an event-driven data layer solution. And I only say event-driven data layer because it's compatible with compatible with everything, and JSON objects aren't. Urs, he said, never used the Adobe Data Layer Manager. Worth a try already. Yeah, it's definitely worth a try. I think there is one consideration that you want to keep in mind. If you are using it with a single page app, it's free, and the free version gets you exactly where you need to be. There's a free version and there's a pro version. The pro version includes validation and a couple other nice to haves. But you don't need the pro version to use it. The free version has everything. The only thing that's a little wonky with it is this is the SDI one. Oh, Adobe Data Layer Manager. Oh, so there's Adobe Client Data Layer, and then there's Data Layer Manager, sans the Adobe term. The Adobe Client Data Layer is also really good. I've used it. The interface is a little confusing. and I would go in and show it to you if I had selected a different streaming option, aka not the webcam option, but the streaming option. I will be doing that next time I do this, so we can browse through and kind of play around with stuff instead of me doing interpretive dances here. That's right. Okay, cool. Adobe will have an extension for managing their data layer currently in beta, the more public option. Now, Jen, what do you mean by like the more public option? Like I played around with the private extension, but the more public option, is that like... Yeah, we have the SCI data layer manager, but the Adobe would be more supported from IT, so no additional questions like what's that? Oh yeah, they do. And then they have that private extension, yeah. So, and Urs, are you talking about the Oh yeah. I think yeah, exactly. More supported for my right, and that's what I mean. It's like having something from Adobe would be optimal because yeah, if you're a bank, I don't have to go through a lot of redlining on go through legal, and all y'all been through that like legal process before. It's just such a nightmare. So I think like, right, Adobe would either have to like put their name on Data Layer Manager hypothetically, or build their own Data Layer Manager, like Adobe's client data layer. But I'm not sure like I'm not sure if the client data layer would have to go through the same vetting because it's from the consulting group, So that's I think they would trust it, and I've used the private extension, and like I said, it's nice. It doesn't have as many options as Data Layer Manager, but it was built in a hackathon in 24 hours. So it's it should mean more vetting if it's from the consulting group. I mean, yeah. Hypothetically, that's the thing. Like that's the thing. That's why having, I think, an officially supported data layer from the product group, like at least sponsored from the product group, is critically important for launch, in my opinion. Just so when people Google stuff, we have a clear direction, and W3C is not an option. It's not a sustainable option. Yeah, the product group is focused on XDM, but as an extension from XDM, shouldn't that? Yeah, it is kind of data layer, and it's kind of not a data layer. I think it is a data layer discussion because you have to have one, but I mean, I get that it also kind of isn't a data layer. It's like the layer past the layer. So you build out your data layer, and data layer is one of other stuff. But when we talk about overall volume of data that goes into something like XDM, in my experience, the majority of that data will be from a website. There's offline stuff and there's other data sources. And at least for the short term, in the near term, most of that data will come from a website. So I think focusing on enabling people to pass data into XDM it just seems like the right move. And I feel like Google kind of got it. And Enrique, should we just abandon page data layers for events data layers In my opinion, yeah. I mean, you'll have a page object still. Like you'll still have page.name, but kind of in that array format. So I think, yeah, I feel like we should abandon the W3C format, the traditional JSON object. I think it just complicates things, introduces too many different design patterns, and I think it's easy. It's easy for analysts to grasp, and this is what's interesting, and this is where a lot of people get hung up on in analytics technologies and why so many analytics technologies fail, for lack of a better word, is you have, and it's also kind of what I worry about with future products, future Adobe products, and I think Google does a good job at keeping it relatively grounded, but there's this spectrum, right, where people enter analytics. A lot of people start off as business analysts and back into development. And some people start off as developers and back into analysis. Now, most of the time, people stay like over here or over here, and there aren't too many people who are right here. And so, as a result, products are either built on this technical side or they're built on this analysis side, this business analysis side. And when you're working with those two ends of that spectrum, you're not addressing a bigger audience. So the developers will say, this isn't enough. Oh, hey, James. And then, oh yeah, sorry about the time. I scheduled this intentionally so not many people would show up. Just because this isn't a smooth format yet, and I'm still working out the kinks with YouTube. So I'm seeing what happens, seeing how much interaction there is in the chat versus like all this other stuff. But good night. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate it. But we have these two sides, and when products are built, they're either built for the analysts and they don't go deep enough, or they're built for the developers and they go so deep the analysts don't understand it. And the W3C data layer, I think, does a really good job at sitting in the middle, right? It does a really good job at having the development side understanding it and the analyst side understand it. Now, the problem with event-driven data layers right now, in my opinion, is it doesn't do a good job at sitting in the middle. I think even with Google Tag Manager, it edges a little bit too far over to the developer side. And I think it's in the best interest of folks who develop event-driven data layers. And I don't know how to do this. I think Data Layer Manager does the best job at this, and it's not because I'm biased, which I am. There's a bias there, but it's because it has a really intuitive computed state object, which turns it into your traditional JSON object. But there isn't something that kind of brings it into the middle. Now, how do you solve for that? How do you bring it from kind of more of a technical type of thing? And I think that's why adoption's been low. I think adoption's been low of an event-driven data layer because it's more technical than the W3C, and it's more difficult to grasp. Maybe it's solved through an extension. I think Google's preview mode does a really good job of consuming data layer information and presenting it to the user, but there isn't really something that Adobe has that does that, and I don't know if it's worth their time to build it either. So I don't know, but the event-driven data layer does need to be simplified a bit, in my opinion. And Jen, let me get back to what you were saying. In XDM, in theory, page name should always be passed to platform as xdm.web.pagedetails.pagename or whatever. So if I'm starting a data layer from scratch, why not use the structure required by XDM and skip having something like the Adobe Consulting data layer? So Jen, are you talking about from like a automatically ingesting a JSON object? So like I'd have an XDM object on the site, and then it would ingest XDM dot web.webpagedetails.pagename? Because I think it should. I think it should automatically ingest that, but I think it should do it using an event-driven data layer. When we talk about, because I think if we think the only way to pull xdm.web.page blah 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 is through a JSON object, like a static JSON object, then that's we're boxing ourselves in, right? And if we use, I think we could use that same hierarchy, but then pass that in through an event-driven data layer. All right, so I'm catching up on chat a little bit. Urs, you said I had a really good experience to take a developer on board to create a data layer in Angular, so it's not too bad to go into technical details when defining the data layer, focus on analysis later on. Yeah, that's so Urs, were you using an event-driven data layer, or were you using a static W3C? EDDL, fantastic. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I haven't had too many good experiences with like Angular and React and stuff like that with W3C unless I paired it with something like a browser events or direct call rules. Jen said, yeah, if I have a data layer that doesn't match XDM, then in launch I have to do a bunch of map. Yeah, right, exactly. And I think you're 100% right. That it's weird, and you have to do some like mental gymnastics if you had to remap it. Like it seems like a waste of time, and I don't. I think XDM should be built around an event-driven data layer. I don't care whether it's Adobe Client Data Layer or whatever, but I wouldn't be able to recommend to my yeah, absolutely easily could be, and I think it's super eventy. I think we're sending mixed signals to people when we're, and even in the Adobe documentation, they're still using the digital data format instead of the XDM dot format, which, I mean, I think it would be easier to set like a root object, so you don't have to do like type the XDM thing. Just set the root path, and then it reads the whatever's paired with that root, or whatever's in the next level. So instead of like app event data or data layer dot or digital data dot, you just type in that object, and then it absorbs the rest of it. Let's see, Enrique, should we think of server-side collection with the data layer only as an endpoint for client-side needs? Nah, probably not. But given that we're kind of myopic as an industry, I'm saying we're pretty myopic as in, like, we talk a big game as an analytics industry. Like, we talk a really big game. But the stuff that we can do, which is like, imagine this is like a scale of all of this stuff that we could do with our data. We do about like this much 95% of the time. The other 5%, we max it out. So it's a tricky question. I think yeah, to be honest, I would just look at it like that and focus most of my attention on that, and then the other 5%, I'll just figure it out as I go. But yeah, I think server side is an interesting topic, and that's going to be we're going to have a whole discussion on that. I don't really want to get into it today. Server-side tag management and stuff like that. There's a lot of speculation and a lot of guesswork. How long do all y'all think it's going to take for 25% of companies to migrate to server-side tag management? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, Jen says years. Yeah, definitely years. If you said months, that would be. I mean, I'm just getting people off of DTM, so like, you know, my guess is for 25%, probably 7 to 8 years. After my kid graduates from college, he's 4. Yeah, there's like another gigantic mental leap when it comes to server side, right? We staffed as an industry for front end analysts, right? For tag management. Clients have staffed for front end. When we hire people, we don't ask, hey, so what are your skills with Amazon S3? Do you know how to configure servers and blah, blah, blah? It's territory that we're still feeling out. I don't, like, you lose me when you start talking about server-side stuff personally. So I'm kind of like clinging on to this data layer stuff because that's front end at least. But most people are front end people, and that's kind of how we've operated. Now with the latest privacy changes, obviously we have to make some changes as an industry to accommodate that. And those are driving me crazy. Corey Underwood does a great job at talking about that. So if you haven't read up on Corey Underwood's stuff, it's information overload to me, and I don't understand most of it, but it's good information, and it's really neat to see where the industry is going with this from a macro scale. And from a macro scale, Apple doesn't care about cookies because they don't need them. They don't make money from them. Apple makes $0 from cookies. Google, on the other hand, makes a ton of money from cookies. But it's also why they built their own browser, was to get ahead of their dependence on cookies, which is why a lot of us use Chrome. So that's a totally different... I'm not throwing total shade, Drew. I mean, it's just like, it's like partial. It's like, I mean, you got to follow the money when they make changes like this. I don't know of many, if any, situations where somebody had their identity stolen because of cookies. Like, I know there have been cases, but I'm pretty sure Equifax is a much bigger threat than cookies. People just get creeped out from retargeting, and sometimes people accidentally collect passwords. You were told to come here and troll. I have an article that's mostly written that I was writing with Corey Underwood about that we were writing a long time ago when we were at, like, before he joined Search Discovery, and I was like, dude, this doesn't make sense to me. Why are we talking about this whole privacy thing and associating it with cookies? I get it. Like, you have user ID that follows you around if you log in. And Jen, yeah, you're right. It is security theater. And it drives me nuts how companies like Apple, for instance, Apple is waiting on a critical, and this is me throwing shade. I'm throwing shade. I'm not throwing shade at Apple because this is a smart move. This is a really smart move. But it's really annoying. Apple is waiting for a critical mass of people to have facial recognition, password, thingy. Like, there's a critical mass. There's like my guess is 80% adoption. They're waiting for 80% adoption of this facial, biometric password. Like, you're waiting for 80% adoption before they just totally kill cookies. It'll only be session based, guaranteed. Like, mark my word here, they will only support first party session based cookies for everything very soon. And then Brave will follow suit, and Firefox will follow suit. And because Firefox, how Firefox makes money. How many of you in chat know how Firefox makes money? How do you think Firefox makes money? I'm curious. I'm curious if any of you, don't Google it. If you don't know, that's fine. I didn't know. Firefox is still around. Firefox makes money. Kind of royalties, yeah. Google pays them. So Google pays them to be the default. Yes, exactly, Phil. Search contracts on the homepage. Yep. To be the default search. Now, for 2 years, Yahoo held that contract. But Mozilla gets paid over $200 million per year to have Google as their default search engine. $200 million. So Firefox is going to double down on the privacy because that is the benefit of their. And honestly, with the way that Chrome's been using my memory, I think a lot more people are probably going to start migrating back to Firefox in the medium term. But Firefox buys into the privacy theater too. They make money from, yeah, we do need more extensions on Firefox, but they make money from just people installing the browser. So they're going to go all in on privacy. And privacy to them means reducing cookies, which has nothing to do with privacy. It has nothing to do with your identity, staying safe, and all that other stuff. How do you think Apple makes money? Selling hardware. Selling hardware, collecting your biometric data, selling stuff on iTunes, selling stuff on their store, stuff like that, collecting royalties from microtransactions. And how much of that has anything to do with cookies? Zero. And who is their competitor? Google. Google makes their money from retargeting ads, from ads, and a little hardware, and a bunch of other stuff. They diversify a lot, but they make money from paid search, from paid ads. Paid ads are driven by cookies. So that's the thing. That's where we're seeing these cookie battles in the name of privacy. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. You can Google cookie, news stories for cookies, and see how many identities were stolen because of cookies. None. It's all from cookies, or identities are stolen from people putting in their information on unsecure sites, or from data being stored in unsecure locations. It's not cookies. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I want to cut it before 5 o'clock. I know you all have stuff to do. If you work in consulting, submit your time cards. Looking at you, everybody, almost everybody. If not, have a great weekend. Thank you for coming to this stream. I hope it was fun. I always talk a lot. The next one will be a little bit more interactive. We're going to go through some how-tos. We're going to go type code in and do some codey stuff and talk about how to do things. And right now I don't have plans on bringing in guests, but I mean, at some point we can. I just want to kind of keep it interactive and hopefully come up with more and more interesting formats. Right now it's just me talking because I kind of want to see how it works. But thank you so much. I'm sorry it's late at night, Urs. I know I got to work on time zone stuff. It was intentionally late, so not many people would join, and then we'll have more preparation for the next one. I need to figure out how to run tests with this stuff and see if this thing was even recorded, which it might not have been. Who knows? Well, if I know Google, they probably have it recorded somewhere. But have a great weekend, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.